Hey guys, I'm Jonathan with the Lion Company. We are back for another Jesus Stories testimony. This one, I'm going to say it's in my top 3 ever.
I love Jesus stories.
Jesus stories are all about Jesus.
Yay!
And Jesus did something incredible. We were recently in California. We ministered. There were a lot of miracles and miraculous things that happened. That was great. But at one point, the people group that we went to go minister to had requested that we give out roughly 35, I think is the number, prophetic words each for myself, Gina, and Prophet to minister to this large group of people. Now, we had ministered one night in a public meeting, and this was going to be like a private, closed leaders meeting for us to kind of prophesy over these people. And it was stretching for me. You know, we've prophesied, we've been prophetic for a long time. and I love hearing the voice of the Lord just for the sake of hearing his voice. I love that. But going like one after another, after 35 others, is not something that I've been pressed or pulled on to do before. And so while many people might have been like, wow, that's a tall order, just say no. I actually felt a grace to say yes and to take a risk because we like adventure. And so we thought, well, let's do this. So we were really excited. We had about a day's notice to get these prophetic words. And so we decided we were going to go on a drive, grab some coffee, make our brains think a little faster, and just talk to the Lord and talk to one another. You were feeling a little different about that. Tell me about it.
Yes. So usually I have time just to sit with Jesus and just pray, and I have a list of names so that I just can really take time with each person. And so I was a little intimidated.
Yeah, she was.
So I was like, oh, Lord, I want to love people well. And so I know you want to love them well.
Yeah.
So I knew God would meet me, but I was processing with my husband.
That's me.
My nerves and explaining my processes.
Yeah, so she's in this moment of tension where she wants to be able, it's a conviction of ours that when you can give things to people when they ask, you're a lot like Jesus, right? So, and we know who lives inside of us. So when people make a demand on us, we want to be able to deliver to them what they're requesting. And so this was a request. So we're driving down the road. She's in a loving, awesome Gina meltdown and just saying like, how do we fulfill this? Prophet, on the other hand, took about 6 hours and had all of his prophetic words. And, there are times I love him and there are times I just want to smack him around. Not literally, but I'm just like, man, this kid, he loves God. He's just wide open and loves the challenge of getting prophetic words. All of his words landed, of course they did. And so I just tell Gina in this moment, I'm like, hey, we're going to do an exercise really quick. Where we go to minister, we teach people how to hear the Lord or to increase their hearing. We teach on a lot of things, but this is one of the things that people have requested that we teach. Sometimes it's other things like leadership or whatever, and family and marriage. I mean, we just like to teach about Jesus in all these different areas, but hearing the Lord was one. And so I told Gina, I said, honey, we're going to do an exercise. And she said, okay. Well, she didn't know this, but I'm over here going, I'm going to take her in an exercise that she's never been on before. And here we go. And I'm just going to be asking the Lord for questions in real time and lead her through an exercise. And I couldn't have known what would happen as a result of this moment of tension. It's crazy because you need tension in order to become something different. It's just like exercise. It's like the wind blowing the trees. We're made stronger with tension.
You need to follow the unctions of the Spirit, and that was what God had filled your mouth with. So
and rather than running away from the tension, we ran into it. Don't always recommend that, but it's like running into a wall sometimes. But this time it worked, and we broke through. So I just asked a question. I said, hey, I want you to ask the Lord for a name. She doesn't know what we're doing. I don't either. So let's just be really clear. We have no clue what we're doing. And you got a name, random name. And I said, okay, I want you to marry a gender to that name. And she said, it's a woman. I said, okay, what stage of life is this woman in? And she said, retirement age, retirement, portion of life. I'm like, so older, okay. And I said, is this woman married? And you were really clear. You're like, no, she's widowed. That was really specific. And I said, what's her personality like?
And as he's asking these questions, I'm starting to know this woman, and I'm starting, pictures are populating, and I'm seeing, her age and, if she's widowed and...
Stage of life, marital status,
yeah.
Personality type. You said she's a free spirit, but she's also really considerate. And I was like, well, that's sweet. Sounds like a great person. And I said, does she have any animals? She said, I don't know, but if she did, it would be cats. I was like, okay. And I felt like, I asked one more question. I said, what does this woman do for hobby? She goes, oh, she's a painter. She's like an artist.
And at this point, I'm so invested. I could see this lady, going through life and painting and, starting to build a connection.
Mind you, I've never done this exercise before, nor did I know where this was going. Not in the foreground or later for the rest of the testimony. So I then asked Gina, prophetically, I get a question to ask. I say, why doesn't this widow's kids visit?
I just started wailing in the car. I couldn't even get the answer out because I was so emotionally invested, and it crushed me to think that this free spirit artist, wonderful lady who I had connected with in my imagination, her kids wouldn't visit her anymore. And so my heart was crushed.
And so I get this real-time revelation in this moment, and I think this is the end of the testimony, right? You did too. Mm-hmm. I get this real-time revelation about, when you have the original grace on your life. And I say original grace, like the original grace is God's grace. So when I'm using the word grace in this context, I mean to say when the favor of God has hit you in a way to give you a specific gifting as almost a part of your personhood. Right. So if we're talking about in this context, the fivefold ministry, by nature, when you met Jesus, you became a street evangelist. However, by nature, you've always been very much associated to mercy and redeeming and...
I think actually evangelism came out of the pastor's heart that was already there.
So that's what I was going for is Gina has this natural innate desire to pastor people and walk with people. Doesn't matter whether they're easy to love or hard to love, they're all easy to love for you. And so, and that's also just like the nature of Christ, right? It's compassion. But you're really good at pastoring and leading people and tending to the needs. And so I get this revelation in the car. She's wailing, and I say to her, something that God had showed me before, but I really start to polish out the language. And I said, people that naturally are pastors at heart will hear the Lord for the sake of the needy, the broken, those that are in need of compassion. You go to that part of who God made you to be, and you hear very easily. Right. And then I went further, and I was like, the evangelist is going to hear the Lord easily when it comes to the gospel.
Right.
And the prophet's going to hear the Lord easily when it comes to loving the voice of the Lord. The apostle's going to hear the Lord easily when it comes to taking cities, states, and nations. You're going to get blueprints really quickly. And the teacher's going to hear the Lord quickly when it comes to illuminating people's mind to see Jesus more clearly. And I was like, that's it. So I teach this night. We give all of our prophetic words. More people showed up to the meeting than were planned, and we prophesied from dinner time till 1:30 in the morning, and the three of us didn't have a miss.
Prophet did go to bed early.
He did go to bed
was not
early,
up to 1:30.
We had to put him to bed, and then we continued. But
right.
The point is, it's not even bragging at all to say that we did miss. God gave us an upgrade in this moment.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, what did you do, Lord? This was incredible. And the people that we ministered to this night, were leaders of ministries around the world. And they had come in, they were there, just it so happened to be there as a part of that night. Well, this was pretty profound. We were like, wow, this this went way better than we thought. We left and thought, this trip was so good. We had upgrades. We had encounters with Jesus. There were miracles. Praise the Lord. And so we come home, our hearts are full, and we're home, a couple of weeks, and, we go on a journey again, and we just find ourselves along the journey on the East Coast from the West Coast. So literally on the other side of the country. And one of the people that had us come, they picked us up from the airport, and they said, we're going to take good care of you. We've got you in a host home. The Lord really just put on my heart to put you in this host home. And we go into the host home, and we meet our host, and they show us through the home, and they actually had a basement to show us, which was really cool because in Texas, we don't have basements. If you live in Texas and you have a basement, don't judge me. I just haven't seen one yet.
Yes.
But anyway, we're laying in bed in the host home that night, and my brain just like the bulb breaks above my skull. That sounded really graphic, but light bulb moment. And I go, babe, do you know where we are? She's like, we're in PA. And I'm like, no. Babe, do you know where we are? Do you know where we are? She's like, babe, we've been traveling all day long. Like, babe, it's bedtime. Just tell me what you're getting to. And I said, we're in a woman's house that is retired and is a widow. And she's a painter, like a high-level artist. And she has cats. And she told us that night that her kids didn't visit. And we're like laying in bed going, we thought this person was like a prophetic figment of our God imagination.
Yeah.
That God used to give us an upgrade, to go minister to leaders. And instead, God was showing us a layer to his heart for widows in a way that we had never fathomed. And so 4 days go by, we're doing relationship with this person.
And we feel like she's family immediately because
Yeah.
God has connected our hearts to each other.
Like true family.
It was really wonderful.
And so we're like waking up and having breakfast together and just, hanging out around the kitchen and laughing.
Yeah.
And she's really taken to our son. And so we're just like, man, this feels like home, like deep home, family. And God told me today's the day you're going to share. So it's 4 days in.
Yeah.
I think it was the fourth day. And I sit down at the dining table and I began to say, hey, we just the same story we just shared with you guys. Like we had this moment where, Gina was wanting an upgrade and we had all these people to minister to. And so we did this exercise and, she got these details of some random fake person. And then she got this upgrade and ministered until 1:30 in the morning and all the words landed. So it's totally the Lord. Isn't that a great testimony? She's like, yeah, why are you telling me this? Like, it's a great story, but like you said, you needed to sit me down. And I'm like, well, what those details were. She's like, no. And I start one by one to give the details until about midway through, she's weeping, saying, I'm that person. And I'm like, you are that person.
How amazing is God?
And we're crying around the table in like this moment of just somebody that very likely felt completely unseen. Without a voice that's able to communicate to the world. And right in the middle of this like holy moment, I just looked at her and I said, I need you to appreciate this even more than you already do. She's like, what do you mean? And I said, Jesus likes telling his own story a lot. He does it through all of his sons and daughters all the time. She said, yeah. And I said, but in this particular case, Jesus told his story through you, a widow, on the East Coast, to two strangers in a car to give them an upgrade to minister to leaders that minister around the world. And that's like no exaggeration.
Right.
He used your story to tell us how to hear him better and to make us effective at ministering to leaders. And you never had to open your mouth. And she was like, oh, like she says in this moment, all the pain and the sorrow and the suffering and the loneliness and the questions that I've asked God are all being washed away now in this moment because God cared to tell his story of my life to somebody else so that others could benefit. And in this moment, all of it's being wiped away. And we just sat and like thanked God.
Yeah.
We went to the room just shortly after this and just kind of had this moment where it was like I don't even know that I fully understand nor appreciate, because they're kind of tied.
Right.
The layers. And I asked God, I said, God, what is this about? And he just said really clearly, he said, you know, Jonathan, pure and undefiled religion is to care for orphans and widows. And there are a lot of orphan ministries in the world, but widows aren't a subject that really get ministered to, or a people, a category of people that get consistent ministry in the body.
Yeah.
And today it really blessed my heart to see that you guys were not only willing to do it, but that you also see that when no one else will tell the story of a widow, I will.
Precious Jesus.
So you see the goodness of God on like radical display for those that don't have anybody to really share their story to.
Yeah.
And so I just want to encourage you guys with this Jesus story. If you feel unseen, you feel unheard, if you feel unknown, if your pain is something that you feel like you suffer with in silence, there is a wonderful chance. And I would say, what are the chances of God sharing your story to somebody else in order, you know, on the other side, basically, of the country or the world for that matter, so that they can benefit? I'd say it's probably slim to none until it happened. And now I can tell you with confidence, there's a pretty good chance that God is sharing your testimony, the one that you haven't gotten to share with the rest of the world, so that they can benefit from the life that you live. This person we know now really well, and this person takes great joy in being alone with her Jesus and her art and living really a peaceful life, and knowing that people may not appreciate the story. It's wrecking me. To know that you could live a life with God that is so pleasing to him that he will tell your story for you is like so backwards to the way that I would process. And it broke something in us to say, like, at the end of the day, if there isn't a platform, if there isn't an internet audience for you, if there isn't income or stability, that at the end of the day, the joy that God takes in you walking out your story with him,
Audience of one.
truly an audience of one, is enough. And so we bless you guys with the testimony that God not only sees you, but he takes joy in your time spent with him when nobody else is looking. And it's more than enough.
I'll hear Jason Epton's song. There's a God.
Yeah, there's a God who sees right where we are. And that's exactly what we learned. This song became living art before us. And so we bless you guys with this testimony. And Lord, I would just ask that you would give people peace and joy to know that that time spent with you is never time wasted.